Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 11th World Potato Congress. Please make note of the nearest emergency exits, and we ask that you switch your phones to silent. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can please take your seats as the Congress is about to start.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we can finally take our seats and get the show on the road, please. Okay, I'm going to make a start. Director General, Your Excellencies in the audience, Commissioner, Minister, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, you're all very welcome to the 11th World Potato Congress. This is the first time the Congress has been here in Ireland, and we hope that you enjoy your stay. I think as many people are not native to the country, I think it's important that you remember just one small message from me. And that is that a stranger is merely a friend that you haven't yet met. So please feel free to talk to everybody that you meet during these couple of days. My name is Andy Doyle. I am tillage or crops editor with the Irish Farmers Journal, an agricultural newspaper here in Ireland. And I will be your master of ceremonies, whatever that means exactly, for the next number of days for most sessions. But take it, I'm also here as a face that you can recognize, say hello to, and feel free to consult if there is an issue or a problem. I may not know the answer, but I certainly will try to find it out. I know that we have 900 odd delegates registered for the conference, coming from 61 countries. And I'm also very pleased to say that I have visited almost half that total number of countries in my professional career. So perhaps if anybody strikes a conversation with me, I might have been in your patch too. Okay, look, we're now don't know where I put my watch, but we're now an hour and almost 12 minutes late starting this conference. Sorry, did I say an hour? A year and 12 minutes late starting this conference. The year I can do nothing about. The 12 minutes is probably partly my responsibility. So without further ado, I'm going to begin proceedings. And I want to ask the chairperson of the organising committee, Liam Glennon, to just give an opening address.
Thank you, Andy. Director General, Premier, Commissioner, Ministers, Ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This was a real roller coaster. In 2018, when the local organising committee chose as the Congress theme the changing world of the potato, little did we know then just by how much the world was going to change. The global pandemic resulted in 4 long, stringent lockdowns in Ireland and a postponement of this event by a full year. Last winter, there was a strong Omicron upsurge in many countries, and all that followed by an outbreak of war in the Ukraine. But of course, everything is relative, and the problems we were having were as nothing compared to those losing loved ones due to COVID or war. On the 31st of January last, we had 55 registration for this Congress. We needed 800 to break even. It was an interesting time, but we took more than a small measure of courage from a WPC topic title, Jason Davenport's No Risk, No Reward. But thanks to you, and perhaps a bit of Irish luck, we have almost 900 potato professionals gathered here today. Words cannot express how pleased we are to see you. With your kind permission, it's now time to introduce the Congress celebrity. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you potato power. On the off chance that there might be a few skeptics amongst you, just look at the distinguished roll call we have here today. His Excellency, the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the Premier of Prince Edward Island, Canada, the EU Commissioner for Agriculture, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine of Ireland, the Minister of Agriculture and Land of Prince Edward Island, Canada, and his Deputy Minister, their Excellencies, the Ambassadors to Ireland of Belgium, Canada, Chile, the People's Republic of China, Peru, and the Netherlands. Dozens of presidents, secretary generals, and CEOs. The local organising committee cannot take the credit for this. It was potato power. The power of the potato to move people, literally. During the week, you will hear from some amazing speakers on how potato power can be harnessed to provide healthy, wholesome, nutritious, and sustainable food, to provide food security and help alleviate poverty and hunger. In Ireland, we know about hunger. Black 47, the worst year of the Irish potato famine, occurred 175 years ago this year. Unfortunately, famine is still with us. 800 million people still going to bed hungry every night. The timing of the Director General's visit is highly appropriate, therefore, and we sincerely thank him and a very strong FAO delegation for joining us in Dublin today. Time does not permit me here to thank all involved. The list is far too long, and I hope I have done so in the WPC programme. But I must mention three particular groups. Irish Potato Federation members were early and strong investors. Irish state agencies could not have been more supportive. And all our international sponsors too, most of them, all of them listed on this slide. In spite of two seismic events and a postponement of this Congress by a full year, not one single sponsor withdrew. And now, to the potato buyers amongst you. This is an Irish rooster. Unsurpassable, 21% dry matter, excellent all-rounder, fries, bakes and boils beautifully. When roasted, pure decadence. Orders are being taken during the breaks. The minimum order is a truckload, and I strongly advise you to get in early and beat the rush. Finally, for two WPC delegates here today, this is a particularly challenging time. As a gesture of solidarity and appreciation for joining us in Dublin, may I ask all WPC delegates, please, to extend the warmest of warm welcomes to Mykola Gordichuk, the Vice President of the Ukrainian Potato Federation, and his colleague Viktoria Yalovenko. Both Mykola and Victoria will be on the Ukrainian stand number 23 during Congress Week. Céad míle fáilte a gcuine úsle agus guribh míle maithagibh go léir. 100,000 welcomes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. And I now want to call on the President and CEO of the World Potato Congress, Romain Cools, to give the opening address for this Congress, please. Romain.
I'm going to try to see what I see. Dear Minister, dear European Commissioner, dear Director General and Deputy Director General of FAO, dear Mrs. and Mrs. Ambassador of the People's Republic of China, Peru, Canada, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Chile, dear Premier, Minister and Deputy Minister of Prince Edward Island, Canada, the home of WPC Incorporated, dear President of the Irish Potato Federation, dear Director General of the International Potato Center, dear members of the local organizing committee, dear sustainable partners of WPC, my dearest potato friends from all over the world, how much did I miss you? How much did we miss each other during this pandemic that has changed our lives so dramatically and still is affecting us today? Fáilte go héireann, fáilte go maile ótha clia. Welcome in Ireland, welcome in Dublin. First of all, I would like to thank the Irish Potato Federation, the Ministry of Agriculture of Ireland, and Teagasc, the local organizing committee and keynote PCO, who has organized the event in the historical location of Ireland, the country which history has been affected by potatoes like no other country in the world. But most of all, I would like to thank each of you, gathering from all corners of the world, accepting the invitation despite the pandemic, despite the turbulent times we are living in. Let's look at it. A couple of years ago, the issue of food security seemed part of history. The COVID pandemic, as well as the disturbed trade relations, and especially the current conflict in the heart of Europe, have put the issue back on the table. Rising food prices, lack of availability of fertilizers, pesticides, the increased price of energy, the impact of climate change, and the disturbed global trade mechanism are not only the concern for a new famine in parts of Africa, but also in the rest of the world. We see the impact of the raising cost of life on purchasing power of families, and increasing food prices start to affect the food pattern, especially for children. In its vision and mission, the World Potato Congress is to create a value chain network to lead sustainable growth and development of the potato in order to meet the increased global use and demand. Therefore, next to our biannual Congress, WPC is setting up other activities to strengthen the global network. Just think about our webinar series and the WPC toolbox to guide new potato initiatives in the developing world. On Wednesday, at this Ireland Congress, we will launch the Declaration of Dublin, making an appeal to the world to invest in a more performant potato value chain, contributing to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. World Potato Congress is mobilizing a number of countries led by Peru, of which we have the ambassador with us, to support in FAO the proposal to celebrate a United Nations recognized International Potato Day. Why are we taking such an initiative? Well, very simple. Because we believe that potatoes really can make the difference. The potato is considered one of the most sustainable staple food crops, producing more energy and protein per unit of land and water than any other crop. Additionally, the potato contains 80% of water, the rooster only 97%, as you have heard. By definition, potatoes are short chain and thus locally grown and consumed. International trade of goods and services contributes to create more access for more people to potatoes and potato products. At this Congress, it will be illustrated again that the potato is extremely healthy and nutritious and excellent fuel for the human body. All these arguments, next to the fact that already a lot of initiatives have been taken within the potato value chain to set up sustainable potato projects in areas in Africa, South America, and Asia where potatoes can thrive, have increased the belief that potatoes really can make the difference and be part of the solution. An International Potato Day will not only highlight the potato's history, culinary richness, or social economic impact, but also its promising future for smallholder farmers to provide sustainable food for the world's population of 9.7 billion people by 2050. During the conference, we will experience how R&D and the private sector are working on solutions to cope with the effects of the climate change and contributing at the same time to a planet-saving circular agriculture and economy. I wish all of you an interesting conference and a lot of inspiring contacts with colleagues from all over the world in this wonderful and exciting, changing world of the potato. Thank you.
Romain Gorav Mahagot, which in our native language means thank you. Okay, the local host for this Congress is the Irish Potato Federation. And I now want to call on its president, Michael Hoey, to say a few words, please. Michael.
Again, Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes to every one of you for being with us here today. I feel deeply humbled to stand here before you in Dublin today to welcome the World Potato Congress to you. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here today. We in the Irish Potato Federation are a very small group, only 10 members. And to to put something like this together was massive. And when Liam Glennon, in any other business, in an ordinary federation meeting 8 years ago, brought up this topic and said it was his dream to bring the World Potato Congress to Ireland because of our DNA. Our DNA meaning that part of our makeup, part of our blood is potatoes. So everybody said, really, we are such a small country producing such a small acreage of potatoes. How could this be done? But when you think about it, Ireland on the world food stage punches way above its weight. In dairy produce, in other produces, we export to almost every country in the world. And when it comes to whiskey, there's no better than the Irish whiskey. So if we can export whiskey all over the world and talk about it, there's no reason why we can't attract people to come here and talk about potatoes. Sometimes we're so busy in our everyday lives, thinking about the tasks we have to do, dealing with our customers, dealing with weather events, all the time worries that don't really mean anything at the end of the week when the problems are solved. But I ask you this week, just be yourself, just think of yourself, share with others, share your information, share your knowledge, because together we can be unbeatable. And in these times when the challenges of world food security is a huge problem, and we're just after coming through the COVID pandemic, and everybody was scared through that. And as Liam said, we were worried that nobody would be able to come to this Congress today. But thank God that has gone to one side. But we are so delighted to have our Ukrainian colleagues here today, and the pain that they are feeling, I think every one of us in this room shares that pain. So, as part of a group, as part of potato professionals, I want you all to enjoy this Congress, to enjoy every minute of it. And what makes a successful Congress is each person putting their own part to it. And hopefully, on Thursday evening, when we're all finished and we've listened to a wealth of knowledge from such a speaker lineup, we will come away and say, that was a worthwhile Congress to attend. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and spending that time with us here in Dublin, because I know that is not an easy thing to do. And also, I want to thank our own ministry, all our government bodies for the support that they gave to the Federation. And then when it comes to the sponsors, when we approached these people, they said, yes, we want to be part of something that's real. So people have been hiding away for so long with the pandemic over the last couple of years. This is really the first time that we can be together again. So thank you so much for being here, and I wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I know that your comment that requested people to enjoy themselves when they're here was actually an order, not a request. So that gives lots of scope. Okay, look, at following all of those welcome addresses, it gives me great pleasure now to call on the Irish Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConalogue, to come and officially open this Congress. Minister.
Thank you very much, Andy. Director General, Deputy Director General, Commissioner, Premier, Ministers, Ambassadors, very distinguished guests. It is an absolute pleasure to officially open the 11th World Potato Congress, and I extend a warm Irish welcome, or a Ced Míle Fáilte, as has been extended to you already, to all of you who have travelled from around the world to attend and participate in the Congress this week. While we may not have invented the most versatile food in the world, I believe that we are best at producing the humble spud, or the pratie, as it is called in Irish. Ireland is synonymous with the potato. It's part of our history, our very identity. No one item or food has left such an indelible mark on the identity of a people than the potato has done in Ireland. But more on that later. The Congress provides a rich opportunity for knowledge sharing and collaboration, and is a testament to the organisers and delegates alike that over 1,000 people have travelled from over 60 countries to be here today. In particular, I welcome the European Commissioner for Agriculture, Janusz Wojciechowski, as well as Dr. Chu, Director General of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. The Commissioner and Dr. Chu are two men I've had many meetings with and dealings since I've been appointed, and I commend both of them for their tireless work in their respective areas. I also congratulate Michael Hoey and the Irish Potato Federation, who had to hold off some very serious competition to host this important Congress. It is a great privilege for Ireland to host this unique event and to be seen once again as a global leader in the agri-food stage. We are the sustainable food capital of the world, built on the bedrock of 130,000 farm families, so it is great to see Ireland take centre stage at such a privileged event. Since the domestication of potatoes in the Andes over 7,000 years ago, the potato has become a staple food in many parts of the world and continues to play an important role in food and nutrition security, dietary and economic diversification. As I said earlier, no other food has a more deep and intrinsic relationship with Ireland than the potato. Ireland was one of the first European countries to accept it as a field crop in the 17th century, where it was embraced, becoming a staple food by the 18th century. From my own home in Donegal in the northwest of the country to the southeast, the spud has been grown on every farm in the country over the years. Even to this day, there are farmers of all shapes and sizes who grow their own potatoes out the back of their homes. It thrived in the damp and temperate climate of Ireland, provided sustenance to families on small areas of land, and contributed to the mid-18th century population explosion here. However, this almost complete dependence on the potato proved catastrophic when potato blight first destroyed the crop in 1845, marking the beginning of the Great Famine in Ireland, something that is still imprinted on the Irish psyche today. The first signs of potato blight in Ireland were recorded at the Botanic Gardens of the Royal Dublin Society in August of 1845. The venue in which we are gathered here today is the same Royal Dublin Society, a fitting and poignant setting for this 11th World Potato Congress. Prior to the Great Famine, we had a population of 5 million people, and as a result of the famine, 1 million emigrated, 1 million perished. We are only now back to reaching this population again in Ireland. Indeed, my own department's long history is intertwined with that of the potato. Ireland has excelled in the areas of plant breeding, pathology, agronomy, and knowledge transfer to producers. It established a seed potato certification scheme in 1918, which was one of the first in Europe. Ireland has since been an innovator in potato research, science, and technological developments. Today, the department has a unique collection of potato varieties which is being maintained at the TOPS Potato Propagation Centre in Donegal, where over 750 varieties are maintained, including many old Irish varieties. The genetic diversity of the collection will be available to potato plant breeders to help support the sector through advances in agronomy, breeding, and genetics. Research and innovation plays a key role. Through the Research Stimulus Fund and participation in European research initiatives, my department continues to support the potato industry in Ireland through funding for agronomy, breeding, and genetics research. This is an essential contribution to ensure a flow of sustainable new varieties, technological advances and innovations which will help to achieve our climate and sustainability goals for the greater public good. The potato industry, like many others, has undergone changes over the last number of years, but central to the success of our sector has been our commitment to quality and dedication to excellence. Although the potato industry in Ireland is small, it is one of the most technologically developed in the world, with a cohort of hugely professional growers and packers who supply premium local food to consumers. I'm sure you will all agree when you see that professionalism firsthand as part of your tours this week. Our Agriculture and Food Development Authority, Teagasc, has led a very successful potato breeding programme, resulting in the leading ware variety in Ireland, Rooster, which Liam gave a very good explanation of earlier. The collaboration between Teagasc and potato sector stakeholders is an excellent example of public-private partnership working together for the betterment of the whole sector. As I said, when it comes to research and future-proofing the potato sector, we are never standing still. Just last week, I announced a €3 million support fund for the seed potato sector in recognition of the challenges faced by the sector from Brexit. The funding from Ireland's allocation under the Brexit Adjustment Reserve will accelerate development of capacity within the sector and aid improvements in the production, storage and marketing infrastructure of seed potatoes. Considering that we are the only EU member state with high-grade status for seed potato production, there is huge potential for development in the seed potato sector. The theme for the Congress is the changing world of the potato, which aptly reflects the changing world in which we are living. Ireland has a long tradition of working with other countries to make them more sustainable, and potatoes play a key role in creating sustainable communities in many of these projects. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has long recognised the need to reinvigorate the agricultural and scientific development of potatoes and other beneficial indigenous root crops in the world's underdeveloped regions. To reinforce Ireland's commitment under a framework agreement and the Food and Agricultural Organisation to support agriculture in developing countries, we have provided €100,000 in funding to enable 50 delegates from developing countries to attend this Congress. To work with all representatives of the potato supply chain, including producers, cooperatives, wholesalers, traders, packers, processors, retailers, agronomists, researchers, scientists, and representatives from state agencies and NGOs. Their work will be showcased over the coming days, thus highlighting the links between science, business, and technology. My own department is the leading authority for plant health in Ireland, implementing EU plant health regulations on the National Plant Health as the National Plant Health Organisation. Our Plant Health and Biosecurity Strategy 2020 to 25 outlines the measures undertaken to minimise the threat posed by the potential introduction of plant pests and diseases. The department, through its Plant Science Division, hosts 5 national reference laboratories in the area of plant health. And the work of the reference laboratories ensures monitoring and maintenance of healthy potato production in the country. The department's priority is to continue to support Ireland's role as a global leader in sustainable food systems and is continually adapting to meet challenges and opportunities in the domestic, European and international arenas. The Department of Agriculture supports the development of Ireland's National Agri-Food Strategy, which is updated, revised and agreed by stakeholders every 5 years. The current strategy, entitled Food Vision 2030, has a strong emphasis on sustainability and the interrelationship between food, the environment and our health. The agri-food sector is Ireland's most important indigenous industry here, with exports of some €13 billion. The sector is a dynamic and progressive industry in which the potato plays a significant part. Considering Ireland's high phytosanitary status, we can supply the highest quality seed potatoes. We're also working to support production of domestic ware potatoes for fresh chipping to allow diversification and resilience in the sector. There's a very impressive and varied programme for the World Potato Congress 2022, which is drawn from experts from across the globe. There are 11 plenary sessions scheduled, along with concurrent sessions daily across the 5 Congress themes, which are potato business, innovation research, health nutrition, development and sustainability. The themes set out the key areas of interest in the most practical groupings, although all are independent and related. I know that each of these sessions will be extremely interesting and relevant, regardless of what area of the sector you are involved in. Knowing the meticulous nature of which Michael Hoey approaches projects, I know there will be something for everyone, which gives not much time in the evening to enjoy a Guinness or indeed a potato gin. But I certainly hope you get to experience the famous Irish welcome and hospitality. While you will be spoiled for choice at the Congress this week, I extend an invitation to visit the department stand in the exhibition area, where we further demonstrate our commitment to the potato and sustainability in the changing world. To conclude, I again welcome you to Ireland and to wish you an exciting and great World Potato Congress over the coming days. I hope you can use the Congress to move the sector forward across the globe, whether that be as a response to food and nutrition insecurity, as a source of economic benefit through better productivity, to provide new opportunities for women and young farmers, to improve plant health, to create better resilience and sustainability, or a combination of these benefits. Ireland, with its world-class, pioneering, cutting-edge potato sector, welcomes each and every one of you with open arms here this week. Our identity is greatly linked to the potato, and while our history might have some dark times, the humble spud is a huge part of our lives here and will undoubtedly be and have a bright future. I leave you with a wonderful and apt quote from the pen of the great writer A.A. Milne. What I say is that if a man really likes potatoes, he must be a pretty decent sort of fellow. Thank you and enjoy the week. Bora míle maith agah Bolair.
Minister, thank you very much, and thank you for officially opening the conference. In your presentation, on a number of occasions, you made reference to sustainability, and as did other opening addresses as well. And within Europe, the direction of travel for agriculture in Europe and in Ireland the roadmap has been given to us through the Green Deal, the European Green Deal. And here to give us a feel for what's involved in that, I'm delighted to be able to welcome to the stage Commissioner Wojciechowski, please.
Thank you for invitation, distinguished Minister, the ambassadors, Director General of FAO, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much that I can be here in this World Potato Congress. And first of all, this is for me opportunity to say for all of you, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the contribution of the potato producers, farmers, processors, retailers, for your contribution to ensure food security during very difficult time, especially last 2.5 years. The COVID pandemic, which was mentioned before, creating a lot of problems in many sectors of our economy. Fortunately, there was no food crisis at this time in European Union and generally at the global level also. Thanks our farmers, thanks all food system, including very important sector, which is potato sector. More than 350 million tons of production it was per year. It was huge contribution to ensure food security at the global level and also in European level. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that this Congress is in Ireland, in the country with the special historical experience. Minister Conalogue mentioned that what is the role of the potato production in history of Ireland, and also this tragic experience 177 years ago, when lack of potatoes was reason of the national tragedy and millions of victims. We remember this historical experience. I'm from, from a country from Poland, in which the potato production plays also very important role, historical role, and the present role. This is not only the production, this is part of identity, this is part of the national heritage. Now the production of potato production in many countries in European Union was reduced, but now we have new situation that unprovoked aggression, Russian aggression against Ukraine. This is also a pleasure to see the delegation from Ukraine, that it creates new risk for the food security at the global level. Some problems in European Union, but maybe not direct risk for the food security, but for example, lack of import of grains from Ukraine is creating a lot of problems for livestock sector. We discussed today with the Irish farmers also this difficult problem. But we have the food insecurity risk at the global level in Africa, especially North Africa and Middle East countries, which depend a lot from the Ukrainian import. And we need to think to reconsider our approach to the food security, to produce more food, to review some our strategies, like farm-to-fork strategy, which is a very important strategy. It's necessary to continue the sustainable development, sustainable future of our agriculture. But sometimes we need to reconsider some aspects in the short term, which have impact for the productivity of our agriculture. And potato sectors is one of the possible solutions. I fully agree with this, was mentioned by my predecessors about the role of the potato in sustainable diet, sustainable in the nutrition and sustainable development of our agricultural sector. I'm very interested about your conclusions of your Congress, about your recommendations, because we are thinking now a lot about how to change our policy and to strengthen food security. And I'm sure that one of the important solutions is strengthening of the potato sector, increase of the potato production. We need your production, and I will, with great interest, to see your recommendations from your Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, once again for an invitation. I wish you inspiring debates and conclusions helpful for strengthening of your very important sector, potato sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I think in particular, thank you for acknowledging the work and the efforts of everybody in the supply chain, from the breeders to the people that plant protection, the farmers, for the production of food, which can often be downgraded into something that is a commodity. So thank you very much for those remarks. A number of speakers already, just in the introductory part of the meeting, made reference to the importance of the potato and the place that it has played in history. And the Minister made reference to the really big part that it played in Irish history. And it was big, almost monumentous. In order to locate the potato, Ireland, this Congress, and one other country where our history, or our paths of history have crossed, I'm delighted to welcome to the podium Robert G. Kearns to talk about how the potato has linked us in Ireland. I can't, Robert is here. Okay, I was wondering. Robert, please.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioner, ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure and a great honor to be invited to address this audience today at this first ever World Potato Congress in Dublin. I've been asked to review the relationship between Canada, Ireland, and the potato. All three are near and dear to my heart. Needless to say, this is a vast subject that I will endeavor to compress into the next 25 minutes. So please be assured that I have no desire or intention to present you with tablets of wisdom on how to grow potatoes, as that is your expertise and certainly not mine. However, the social, political, demographic, and historical backdrop of the potato on this island, where I was born and in my adopted homeland, Canada, may be less familiar to many of you. And to cover these fields, no pun intended, in 25 minutes will require me to keep my finger firmly on the fast-forward button. Now, it's very dangerous to put a microphone in front of an Irishman in such a captive audience, but we are very fond of the music of the spoken word. And on many occasions, I've heard speakers rise both here and Irish speakers in Canada and find themselves, speaking a bit too long. And there was a famous incident in Toronto some years ago where a speaker got up and, went on and on and on and on and on. And eventually somebody in the front row got up and started to walk out. And the speaker stopped in his remarks and said, "Where are you going?" So he said, "Well, I'm going to get a haircut." So he said, "Well, couldn't you have attended to those sort of, personal issues before you came here?" Well, he said, "When you got up to speak, I didn't need a haircut." So, I am a proud Dublin-born man, and for the last 42 years, I have made my home in Toronto, Canada. I'm the founder and chair of the Canada-Ireland Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to celebrating the story of the Irish contribution to Canada and Canada's long-standing friendship with Ireland. We sponsor public sculptures and commemorative parks, together with a wide variety of cultural, artistic, and academic activities and initiatives. And to date, our most significant projects have concerned the migration of Irish migrants to Canada during and after the Great Famine of the mid-late 1840s. And this work necessitated a study of the history of the potato, its origins in South America, and its role in shaping Western society, and in particular its lasting influence on Irish society and culture. And the arrival of the potato in Europe and its eventual adoption as the primary food of the peasantry provoked a radical shift in demographics, nutrition, agriculture, and economics. Before the potato, famine and hunger was a relatively constant feature of European peasant life. It's estimated that France had 40 famines between 1500 and 1800. England had 17 in the 100 years between 1523 and 1623. The introduction of the potato to Europe from Peru in the 16th century and its widespread adoption over subsequent centuries was a game changer, effectively eliminating hunger, radically increasing Europe's food supply. And the reliance on the potato improved living standards, exploded the population, provoked massive societal change, and introduced monoculture and encouraged the use of fertilizer and effectively fueled the industrial revolution that was to come. When the Spanish came upon the potato in the early 16th century, they had no idea of the immense value and utility of the tuber. Indeed, the potato would come to be far more important and valuable to Europe than the gold and silver the conquistadores had transported back across the Atlantic. Now, it is likely that the Spanish brought the potato to Europe around 1570 as a souvenir, but it took almost 2 centuries more for Europeans to fully embrace the potato. By 1600, the potato had spread to Spain, Italy, Austria, Belgium, Holland, France, Switzerland, England, Germany, and most likely Portugal and Ireland. But it was generally a garden plant grown by botanists and the gardeners of the nobility as an exotic plant. Those who would benefit most from it, the poor, saw a strange and suspicious plant that had clear associations with evil. The first issue was that it didn't grow from a traditional form of seed, like virtually every other edible plant. The tubers were grotesque and seemingly misshapen. The plant itself was unattractive and strange, and it resembled a mishmash of other plants, many of whom were poisonous or dangerous, such as the mandrake and the deadly nightshade. And when it was classified, the potato was put into the Solanum genus, with the mandrake, deadly nightshade, tobacco, and henbane, all plants with intoxicating or poisonous qualities. In England and France in the early 1600s, it was said the potato caused leprosy. While the rest of Europe treated the potato with suspicion, the Irish, despite their love of superstition, embraced it. Ireland was the first European country to adopt the potato as a field crop in the 17th century, and by the 18th century, it was a staple in many parts of the country. The popularity and spread of the potato in 17th and 18th century Ireland was so complete that the potato came to define Ireland. It shaped social, economic, and cultural life in Ireland, and it was both the safeguard against and cause of famine, of radical population change, and of the poverty of the majority of Ireland's population. There is strong circumstantial evidence that the potato was introduced to Ireland from Spain. Trade between Spain and Waterford in particular was common, and it is possible the potato was introduced with imports of wine and cloth. Another possible source was Basque fishermen who may have introduced the potato when landing in Ireland to dry their cod in the late 16th century. The potato is said to have first appeared as a field crop in Wicklow in the 1640s, but was adopted as a staple first in the province of Munster by about the 1740s. At the time, the staple diet consisted of oats, butter, and other dairy with some regional variations. This diet was prone to winter scarcity if the oat harvest failed and it was short. The potato became an excellent insurance food. By 1780, the potato was the main staple throughout much of the island of Ireland. So why was the potato adopted so rapidly by the Irish? There were several factors at play. The first was that Ireland's climate was remarkably well suited to growing the potato. It thrives in wet conditions and did better than other crops such as grains in intense rain or damaging wind. And the weather also protected the potato from insect-borne viruses such as curl. The relatively mild winters and springs of Ireland, thanks to the Gulf Stream, meant the growing season for potatoes was long and steadily mild. The second factor in its popularity was that the potato was remarkably easy to cultivate. It fit neatly into an agricultural context in which arable land was scarce. The potato grew well in poor soil. This was ideal for areas, particularly in the west of Ireland, where land was scarce. The rundale system, which governed land tenure in the 18th century, had resulted in the peasantry farming increasingly smaller and smaller parcels of land, as tenants shared portions of their rented holdings with their offspring. Thus, population increases and pressures pushed peasants to cultivate increasingly marginal land. The cultivation of potatoes did not require farm machinery or livestock, which were not available to the Irish peasantry in the 18th and 19th centuries. One needed only a spade and mussel to prepare the ground for planting. The Irish developed a method of cultivation known as lazy beds. Just move on there. There we are. A technique that combined ridges and furrows and was used to grow potatoes in even the most thin or poorly drained soil. While some observers saw the method as lazy, it was certainly not. The 3 to 5 foot wide ridges were dug by hand, with spades used to turn over sods to create a raised bed with drainage furrows on either side. Fertilizer of manure or seaweed was gathered and transported up to mountain fields on foot. and the ridges were tailored to suit the soil quality, the drainage, and the slope. The resulting beds were warmer and drier than the surrounding soil, which increased the yield. The ridges were usually redug each year, with one year's ridge becoming the next year's furrow, and so forth. So there's still evidence on the countryside in Ireland, as you can see in this image here, of these lazy beds from the 19th century. The potato was also remarkably easy to cook and required very little specialized cooking or eating implements. Potatoes required little or no preparation, no threshing, drying, or extensive cooking. They required little equipment or space for preparation, and as such, they fit perfectly into the Irish peasant home, where furniture was scarce, as were cooking utensils. Fuel was plentiful, however, and in the absence of sufficient clothing, most peasant families kept a turf fire burning continuously. Potatoes could be roasted quickly and easily in the embers of the household fire. Potatoes could also be boiled. Many households had only one large pot for boiling potatoes that might double as a wash basin. Knives and forks were rare, so potatoes were usually peeled and eaten by hand. It was said that the Irish let one fingernail grow long for the purpose of peeling potatoes. It was estimated that by the early 19th century, Irish peasants ate an average of 5.5 pounds of potatoes a day, with men eating 8 to 10 pounds on average. Therefore, an acre could feed 6 people for a year. Observers saw that despite their poverty, the Irish were healthy, vigorous, and had large families. They concluded that the potato aided reproduction. Wealthy women were prescribed potatoes for infertility. We know now that the potato is remarkably nutritious, and paired with buttermilk and other dairy, it provided the Irish peasantry with all of their energy requirements and nutritional needs. As in other parts of Europe, the potato had become a much-needed insurance against the failure of grain crops and provided added nutrition. It is one of the great ironies of European agricultural history that the Phytophthora infestans blight likely came on the ships carrying guano from Peru and Central America to Europe, which was in the grip of a mania for fertilizer. Though proof has not been found, the blight that preys on species of the nightshade family, and which began the Great Irish Famine, likely arrived first in Antwerp in the early summer of 1845. It went next to France, then destroyed potatoes in the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, and England. It was first reported in Ireland in the summer of 1845, as we've heard from the minister, perhaps in this building, and that's a very interesting point I did not know, where approximately 2 million acres of potatoes were waiting to be harvested. In just 2 months, the blight had destroyed the equivalent of 750,000 acres. For the population now completely dependent on the potato for its nutrition, the effect over the next 5 years was disastrous. The 1801 Irish census reported the island population as 4.1 million people. The 1841 census reported a population of 8.1 million. When the Phytophthora infestans struck the Irish potato crop in 1845, the population may have exceeded 8.25 million people. Now, what is not reported very often when referring to statistics about the population of Ireland between 1800 and 1845 is that we know that 495,000 men, women, and children from this island emigrated to Canada. And that was a more expensive journey than crossing the Irish Sea. So another 495,000 may have emigrated to England, and certainly probably another 495,000 may have emigrated to the United States. So the population growth occasioned by the potato may have actually brought the Irish population closer to 10 million people. But emigration was to relieve that to some degree. So with such a large proportion, a population reliant on the potato crop, the loss of life from hunger and disease was going to be catastrophic. Over 1 million people died, and eventually over 2 million people emigrated. Between potato blight that destroyed the Irish potato crops and the inadequate British government relief efforts in response to the calamity, produced the worst and longest famine in European history. Many of the Irish emigrated to Britain, as it was, as I said, close by and the least expensive body of water to traverse. Many emigrated to the United States, but in the worst year of the famine in 1847, the American ports of Boston, New York, and Philadelphia imposed a stiff fine on ships' captains who carried passengers with typhus or cholera. And as a result of that, the bulk of transatlantic migrants came to Canada. In that fateful year, Black 47, 98,000 Irish emigrants set out from Irish and British ports for British North America. At that time, the country that was to become Canada 20 years later, in 1867, had a population of just 1.5 million. Loss of life on the journey was catastrophic. They traveled on lumber ships as ballast on the return voyage across the Atlantic. These ships became known as coffin ships due to the loss of life from ship fever, which we know today as typhus. Some 20% of all those who set out on the 55 or 65-day voyage died at sea or upon arrival. The Canadian authorities were overwhelmed by this tide of human misery. A quarantine island at Gros-Île in the St. Lawrence estuary was expanded and staffed by courageous doctors, nurses, and clergy, many of whom died and are buried on Gros-Île, along with 4,500 Irish migrants. There are a further 6,000 buried at Pointe Saint Charles in Montreal. These are the largest communal graves in the entire American hemisphere. A further 1,440 are buried in Kingston, Ontario, and 1,185 in Toronto. So our Canada-Ireland Foundation will be hosting an event in Toronto next week, because in June 1847, the first of 38,560 migrants arrived on Toronto's waterfront, a city at that time of just 20,000 inhabitants. Potatoes were grown in Canada first by settlers from France in the 17th century and 18th century by loyalists fleeing the revolution in the United States and by immigrants from the British Isles and other parts of Europe. On the Pacific coast, potatoes were introduced by colonial officials and fur traders in the early 19th century, and it quickly became an in-demand trade good for the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest. In the 19th century in Ontario, French settlers had grown potatoes along the shores of the Detroit River from the late 18th century, as did loyalists along the St. Lawrence. But by the mid-19th century, wheat was king and dominated the economy. The only exception was in the eastern Ottawa Valley region, where soil conditions made wheat cultivation impossible and the timber trade dominated the economy. In that part of the province, incidentally, an area of significant Irish settlement, potatoes were the dominant crop, with oats a distant second. Canada particularly, potatoes were and are still widely grown in Atlantic Canada, particularly on Prince Edward Island. And the Premier of Prince Edward Island is here today, Dennis King, and I send you a warm welcome, along with all the other members of the Canadian delegation. The potato crops on Prince Edward Island and neighbouring Cape Breton were affected by the blight in 1845. In Cape Breton in particular, the blight coincided with an infestation of the province's wheat crop, and consequently hunger was widespread. Farmers tried to feed the infected potatoes to their livestock, only to have the livestock die. So we Irish are no strangers to adversity, and overcoming it at home and abroad, down through the centuries, has become a character trait of our people. Despite the horrific conditions on board the coffin ships and challenging prospects upon arrival, the Irish survivors of the Great Famine migration were quickly contributing to every aspect of life in Canada. They were successful farmers, dry goods merchants, bankers and life insurers, lawyers, politicians, doctors and academics. What is not widely known here in Ireland, as I mentioned earlier, is that between 1815 and the Napoleonic Wars, some 495,000 Irish people had already emigrated to Canada. So many famine migrants were going to join family who had previously emigrated in the 1820s and 1830s. And of course, the McCain family from Lifford in Northern Ireland are a good example of emigrants who came to Canada in the 1820s. In fact, it was 1823, and did very well, especially with potatoes. So a warm welcome home to the McCain family, who I believe are represented here today. In the 20 years that followed, the Irish became a significant percentage of the Canadian population. Today, there are 4.6 million Canadians of Irish extraction, or about 12% of the Canadian population, the highest of any diaspora country. One of the leading visionaries of Confederation in 1867 was Thomas D'Arcy McGee. born in Carlingford, County Louth in April 1825. He was a militant Republican in the failed 1848 rebellion and fled the country to New York. He abandoned his militant political views and instead espoused open government and transparent and democratic government with full respect for religious and political freedom in a society that sought to treat all of its citizens with equality and justice. He continued to speak out against sectarian views and violence as a solution to political impasse. And there was significant sectarian violence in Canada between Orange Order communities and Catholic Irish communities. His vision is the inspiring principle behind Canadian Confederation. Sadly, he paid the ultimate sacrifice in April 1868 when he was assassinated in Ottawa by Irish Republican Fenians. The Irish thrived and prospered in Canada because they found in Canada that which had been denied to them in Ireland by the British government policy in Ireland. Thomas D'Arcy McGee was, in my opinion, the most inspirational and important political figure to leave these shores. He was Ireland's gift to Canada, and it is my lifetime ambition to see his name lifted up in this country so that his values, which both Canada and Ireland espouse and share today, are more widely known around the world. And during these dark days of war in Ukraine, D'Arcy's views of justice, equality, and mutual respect for all citizens has never been more important. Thank you very much for your attention today and for the opportunity to address this audience.
Thank you very much, Robert, for that fascinating account of how the potato has helped to influence two countries at the one time. And I think there's equivalent stories available for many other parts of the world. Okay, that brings this first welcome session to a close. And I'm going to hand over now to Frank O'Mara of Teagasc for the first plenary session, but there's a short comfort break for anybody who needs it, just for 4 or 5 minutes if somebody needs to get a toilet break. So thank you very much, and thanks to all my speakers, and welcome notes of address.